Hi there, this is Evan here, Molendinarius from Latinum, and in this video I want to have a chat to you about memory and learning languages. My focus of course is Latin, but this applies to any language. So the average student, if you look at what most teachers expect, would learn about 400 to 500 new words in a new language in an entire year. Now, that's not that many words. And it is possible to improve on this dramatically. Now, one of the major problems with Latin in particular is that because of the way it's taught in schools, it attracts the top 1 or 2% of the very brightest students. And of course, the way that 1 or 2% of students learn is not representative of the way the rest of us learn. And of course, these people then end up becoming teachers in turn and perpetuate this problem, which is why so few students study Latin. It's turned into this kind of mental gymnastics and is not treated like French or German or Russian or any other language. And the way it's taught is not generally accessible, except in very few programs. So, to change the topic and get back to learning language. Now, the main issue is vocabulary. Yes, there's the issue of grammar and syntax and structure and all these things, but I believe that these are mostly picked up organically by reading and exposure to text, and to a limited extent by studying formal rules. The formal rules are better studied after you've had extensive exposure to text, because then you have something for your mind to grasp onto, and you can apply the rules to sort of what you've experienced. Vocabulary, however, is another story entirely. And what I'm going to do in this video is teach you a method which can be applied to learning lots of things, based on an ancient Greek-Roman method, the method of loci, and it involves forming a memory room. In one memory room, we can have 50 items. So, for example, in the room I'm sitting in now, the wall behind me is one wall. We can imagine that we're starting with the wall that's in front of me, the one you can't see. And this wall we will divide into 9 squares. So I'm going to draw a line here, over there, down, 1, and a line here, down, there we go, and across, 1, and another one across. So we're forming in 9 squares. 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6, and then 7, 8, and then 9. And then up here, just above, on the ceiling, the 10th square. So the wall has got 9 squares. So imagine the room you're sitting in, the wall in front of you, divided into 9 squares, like a giant tic-tac-toe board, or a noughts and crosses if you're English board. And those squares, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and the one on the top is number 10. And we do that with the wall on your right, and the one behind you, and the one on your left. And then the ceiling rows, the light fitting in the center of the ceiling, is the last square. And of course, what I forgot to mention, which is extremely important, is that we do start off with the floor. So the floor are actually the first 9. So let's do that again. The floor in front of us, first 9. The 10th is the ceiling above, and then we have 9 on the wall, the next 10, and then 9 on the wall, the next 10, 9 on the wall, the next 10, 9 on the wall, and then the ceiling rows. And that gives us 50 locations, each of which of course has a number. 1 to 9 on the floor, 10 on the ceiling in front of you, and then that 1 to 9 on the wall in front of you is of course all the 10s. So it's actually not 1, but 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17, 19. The next one is 20, and then we have 1 to 9 on that wall, so but it's 21 to 29. Behind you on the ceiling is 30, and then 1 to 9, but it's 31 to 39. And then on your left we have 40, and then 1 to 9, but it's 41 to 49. And then 50 is in the center on the ceiling. How do we use this to memorize? Well, firstly, if you had a list of things you had to memorize that had numbers attached to them, then this is an ideal way of doing it. You put in your mind's eye an item into the square, and then you know exactly what number it is. So I could say to you, what is number 49 in your list? And you could think, 40 is the left-hand wall, 9 the bottom right square, and you remember what's in that square. This is how the Romans did it, and how the ancient Greeks did it. It's even called the Roman Rumour method. But their system was slightly more chaotic. They would just memorize a room and memorize locations in the room. It wasn't as systematic as this, and so they didn't have the numbering system. The numbering system is a vast improvement, invented, as far as I'm aware, by a chap in the 19th century called Mr. Sams. I'm not aware of an earlier reference to the system of dividing the floor into squares, but maybe somebody prior to Mr. Sams in the early 1800s had developed the system. So a refinement on the Greek and Roman method of loci. Of course, a topic. The word topic comes from the Greek as well, also meaning a location, and each of these squares is a topic. And when you were giving a speech from memory, you would jump from topic to topic, in other words, from place to place. You could use this system for giving a speech. So if you were to give a speech, you'd write out your speech, and then you would summarize each section, and then form some kind of mental image or picture, or some words, and stick them into each square. And then in your mind's eye, you would just flip from square to square, and you could give your speech. If you had to memorize, as I once did, lots of legal cases, you can just stick each legal case in each square. And then if you had to write your essay out, you would have all the information there in order, and you could just start writing, and you'd remember what's in each square. And if you forget what's in one square, well, you've remembered so much information that it doesn't really matter if you miss out one or two things. Now, vocabulary. How is this useful? Well, for example, you want to learn some vocabulary. So you think of the word in the language you want to memorize, and you think of what that word sounds like. So just say the word was, say, amor, I love. Right, nice simple one, amor. So we can stick that in the first square, amor. Now what does amor sound like in English? It sounds like ammo, like ammunition. So you'd say to yourself, okay, I love ammunition. And you remember that. So now amor, you will remember that amor means love, not ammunition. I love. And so on and so forth. In the next square, and you can put a picture in that first square. You can imagine ammunition. You could imagine somebody loving ammunition, and having some ammunition and showering it with affection, and so on and so on. There are various ways to improve the visual experience of each square. If you have motion taking place in the square, anything that's erotic in your imagination will of course reinforce it, because our minds are hardwired that way. Color, if your mind lets you have sound, you could put sound in there too. Different people have different ways of dealing with this. If your sense of touch is very good in your memory, then you could imagine yourself feeling it. Now, I tend to be more touch oriented than visually oriented, so in my squares I actually imagine myself touching the items I've put in each square, and I sort of feel them there, rather than actually see pictures. Sometimes I have flashes of images, but usually it's not. Usually I have like a feeling of what's there. And so you could do that with each square. So you have a vocabulary list that you have to learn. You put each word in each square. You think of what that word sounds like in your own language, and then you make a picture that relates to the word, based on what it sounds like. It can be it hasn't got to be precise. It can be something more long-winded, as long as it helps you hook the two things together. Because this is what you're doing. You're creating links. And if you do this, you can memorize large amounts of vocabulary quite quickly, and large amounts of other information as well. This is very useful. Of course, when in ancient times they said they knew it forwards and backwards, this was the system that was used. Because once you've memorized, for example, if you've memorized a poem and you put the first line of each poem into each box, which you can do quite easily by forming some kind of pictures and sticking the first line, or you could even do it phrase by phrase. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Sweet spring may shake the darling buds of May. And you can stick a few pictures related to those few words in each square. But once you've done that, of course, you can recite the thing backwards because you know what's in each square. So you can start at the end and work your way to the beginning. So that's what they meant when they said he knew it. He could recite it backwards, because systems like this were being used. So that's my little chat about memory systems. I hope you found it useful. Remember, 9 squares on the floor, the 10th on the wall, and then 9, and those are the 10s, the 20th, and then 9, those are the 20s, the 30th, and then 9, those are the 30s, the 40th, and then 9, those are the 40s, and then 50 in the ceiling rows. And then you go to the next room for the next 50, and the next room, and the next room, and the next room. You can use any room as you like. You can use your house. You could open a false door in your mind through a wall and enter an imaginary room. And in fact, in medieval times, before computers, where this system was extremely important, people would construct what were called memory palaces, where they would invent rooms and then fill them up with stuff. But you can just use your house, your friend's house, your grandmother's house, anything really. Online now you can go and look at virtual museums and go through, and you could pick a museum that you liked. For example, they had an online tour, and you could actually use that, which would be very good for you, culturally speaking, because then you would have in your mind that museum in your head in a much more detailed way than you would normally, because you'd be spending more time there. And what more delightful place to be in your mind than in the Louvre or some other museum that has a 3D walking tour, and you could use that as your memory palace. Anyway, that's it from this little talk from Latinum, latinum.org.uk, and you can find us at Patreon. Bye.